Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go over the many components of the CoC, or Continuum of Care, as an introductory web series. This is Session 1, Defining a CoC. This PowerPoint presentation is an overview of the Continuum of Care, specifically highlighting Franklin Essex CoC. If you are a new member of the CoC or a community stakeholder who wants to learn more, we hope to provide you with the basics that you'll need to know. This presentation was developed by CARES of New York and in collaboration with the Regional Racial Justice Advisory Committee. Let's do a quick overview of our objectives for today's session. First, let's start with the overall series goal, and that is to provide a high-level overview of what a continuum of care is to encourage new membership and additional collaborations in the effort to end homelessness. And today's session goal, we're going to be reviewing what is a CoC, who's part of a CoC, your planning body's name, the key roles of the planning body, executing those key roles, CoC-funded programs, the HUD Homeless Definition, and racial disparities in your continuum of care. What is a continuum of care, or a CoC? Well, the acronym refers to both a federal funding stream through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and it refers to a planning body. The CoC program funding is dedicated funds for homeless housing and services. And we'll get into the details of the CoC funding categories later in this presentation. And then there's the CoC planning body, which is made up of members, board leaders, and committees. The planning body makes decisions about local CoC funding for homeless programs, and it coordinates the available housing opportunities and support services for folks experiencing homelessness within the CoC's specified geographic area. Who is part of the CoC planning body? Well, ideally, CoC membership should include community advocates, local faith-based community members, local and/or state government officials, emergency response and healthcare providers, emergency housing providers and nonprofits, and most importantly, people with lived experience. CoC planning body name: Franklin Essex Housing Coalition, FEHC. This is the name that the CoC has provided to HUD as the name that identifies their geographic area and planning body. FEHC and CoC are acronyms that refer to the same thing, the planning body, and are often used interchangeably. During CoC meetings, acronyms are used quite frequently. This information will prepare you for the various acronyms you will hear and utilize as a member of the CoC. Now we'll explain how the CoC executes its key roles. First, how does it execute the key role of preventing and ending homelessness? It reviews and plans with the HMIS and CE data to ensure it has an efficient and equitable system. Next, it develops standards to operate CoC-funded programs and develops an action plan to prevent and end homelessness. And last, it ensures the submission of its annual CoC program funding application to HUD. Next, we'll review how the CoC executes its other key roles of overseeing HMIS and CE. First, You establish a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, between an agency that provides service, e.g. the lead agency, and the CoC. You develop a committee of the CoC to work with that lead agency. And lastly, the CoC should be monitoring the work of that lead agency. CoC-funded programs. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, CoC funding allows for nonprofits to develop programs within these 4 categories: permanent supportive housing, PSH, rapid rehousing, RRH, transitional housing, TH, and support services only, SSO. Permanent supportive housing is a permanently affordable housing unit that is paired with support services. These units are dedicated to persons with physical or mental disabilities who are experiencing homelessness. To get access to these units, a household must complete a coordinated entry intake with a local human service provider. PSH projects can either be site-based, which refers to the homeless service provider owning and operating a building that's dedicated to persons who were previously homeless, or it's tenant-based, which means that the household experiencing homelessness could receive a rental voucher that goes towards a portion of their rent at an apartment of their choosing and is operated by a private landlord. Rapid rehousing is a program that provides relocation services and rental assistance through a voucher, all in an effort to rapidly transition people out of shelter and into potentially permanent housing. The program assists folks in their housing search process and helps them secure a unit with security deposit assistance and coordinating with the landlord. An important thing to note here is that when you are in the rapid rehousing program, you retain your homeless status, which is important because this means your household is able to remain on the coordinated entry list, and if a PSH unit becomes available, you can still be considered for the opening. Rapid rehousing and transitional housing, which we'll get into next, are intended to be short-term to medium-term solutions to literal homelessness. They can lead to other permanent housing opportunities other than PSH, but ideally they're going to be able to transition into the best housing option for their household. Transitional housing are physical units for folks experiencing homelessness to stay while they gain long-term housing stability through the support services offered there. Again, within this program, the household retains its homeless status and stays on the coordinated entry list so that they can still be considered for a PSH opening. Lastly, support services only, or SSO, refers to when case managers conduct outreach to sheltered and unsheltered persons experiencing homelessness, meaning that they could be in a shelter or on the street or in their car, for example. And the case manager is working to link those households with housing opportunities or other necessary services and provide ongoing support to help them retain housing stability. HUD Homeless Definition. HUD has defined homelessness within 4 categories: literally homeless, imminent risk of homelessness, homeless under other federal statutes, and fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. For clarity, the literally homeless status refers to someone living in a place not meant for human habitation, like the street or an encampment or their car, or someone who's living in a privately or publicly operated shelter. The overrepresentation of Black and Brown, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, in our homeless response system. The graph on this slide is depicting data from our homeless system and from the census. This data comparison provides insight into the races that are represented in your general community versus those showing up in your homeless programs. As you can see, the red bar represents the homeless population in Franklin and Essex counties, and the yellow bar represents the general population in Franklin and Essex counties. The data currently available and shown within this graph does not appear to show an overrepresentation of the BIPOC community. The data available within HMIS is limited. So this is an incomplete snapshot of who is accessing services in these counties. Franklin and Essex counties have substantial numbers of tribal communities who provide services to the indigenous population within the area. HMIS data does not currently capture those being served within the tribal support systems. Franklin Essex Housing Coalition has an opportunity to make stronger connections with its tribal partners of the area in helping to solve the issue of homelessness. Upcoming sessions of our CoC 101 web series. Session 2, CoC Structure and Leadership. Session 3, Membership Roles and Benefits. Session 4, Operating a CoC. Session 5, Committee Responsibilities and Mission Statements. We'll see you at Session 2.